Good afternoon, sixth graders. As we move into week 4 of our distance learning, I would like to spend most of this week reviewing our knowledge of World War I and preparation for the test on Thursday. So, by the numbers, really quickly. As you can see here, I've outlined some of the big numbers, the astounding numbers of World War I. And the big numbers to take away from here are that 65 million troops fought in World War I from all countries combined. 8 million died, 21 million were injured in some way, shape, or form. Okay. Now, the U.S. on their side, we didn't get into the war until 1917, but we still sent 4 million troops to serve. Of that 4 million, 116,000 were killed, 204,000 were wounded. Minnesota sent 118,000 men, and of those 118,000 men, 3,607 died, 1,432 in combat, and the rest, just over 2,000 died from Spanish flu. Now, when the war ended in 1919, or when the Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1919, Germany was punished for their part in starting the war, and the punishment that they had to pay was $33 billion to the countries of Europe. Now, later on, that would become very important. So what was it like for the soldiers? As we've talked about, as we've seen, it was not pleasant. The U.S. soldiers arrived in 1917. By that time, the trenches were fully developed, and the war was at a stalemate. The Allies were exhausted. Great Britain and France were nearly out of men. And then arriving American soldiers provided a nice boost, morale boost. They were fresh-legged. They had new supplies. So this was a nice boost for the Allies. In fact, it helped them win the war. But the U.S. soldiers still had to fight in the way that the entire war had been fought, fighting from trenches, running across no man's land, and it was bloody. The U.S. Army fought some major battles, the Battle of San Miguel, Cantigny, and the Second Battle of the Marne. So once again, here's some pictures of the soldiers. These are German soldiers here, Allied soldiers here in the trenches. This is a picture of no man's land, strewn with barbed wire, pockmarked with artillery shell holes that are filled with water, dead bodies. The German soldiers are off here in the distance. The U.S. soldiers are over here. No one really controlled this. This was no man's land. Here is a picture of American soldiers trying to cross no man's land in mass, trying to overtake the Germans. This is a quick picture of no man's land. So here would be the trench system. Here would be the barbed wire right here. Then, of course, this area in the middle that no one controlled was that no man's land. Muddy, shell holes, burning, sometimes dead bodies. It was awful. It's kind of like the thing that people remember of World War I is this no man's land and the trench warfare. So those of us who didn't go fight, or those for the people who didn't fight, what was it like back in Minnesota? Children were enlisted to collect scrap metal. Women made bandages. They wrote letters. People were rationed on what they could consume or buy, so you only could buy a certain amount of gasoline or sugar or flour in a given month. People were encouraged to plant victory gardens, so they would have to buy things from the store. People practiced meatless and wheatless days of the week. So of the 7 days of the week, you may have a couple days where you didn't eat meat or you didn't have wheat in your diet. You had to buy war bonds. The government encouraged you to spend $5 or $10 and basically donate that money to the war cause. And men were working in factories to make war materials, ships, boats, artillery, cannon. Minnesota had a shipbuilding yard in Duluth, and there also was a munitions plant in North Minneapolis. So here's some examples of how the people back on the home front sacrificed. Lots of posters were printed reminding people to do what they could to help. So what did the war solve in the end? What were the results? It's really simple. Nothing. When the war ended in 1918, the two sides sat down and they hammered out what's called a treaty, which is kind of like an end to the war. And this was called the Treaty of Versailles. It was finally finished in 1919. Now here are all the members present at that treaty signing. All these people had a say in what was in there. And the main part of it was there was severe punishments that were placed on Germany for starting World War I. They had to pay back $33 billion to the Allies to rebuild all the land that had been destroyed. Germany had part of their homeland taken away. And And they had to reduce their military by a huge percentage. The Navy could only have a certain number of ships, and the Army could be only a small size. And that was meant to stop Germany from doing something like this again. But guess what? It didn't work. Because the Treaty of Versailles was so harsh, it caused Germany to spiral into a recession. Trying to pay back that $33 billion put a huge strain on the economy. It fell apart, and millions of people became without jobs. Thousands of people were starving, and the country was falling apart. Into that mess came Adolf Hitler. And he rose to power, claiming and telling people that he could bring Germany back to its former might. He blamed World War I on the Jews. And he basically tried to make the country of Germany feel better about itself, and they bought it. Now, as time went on, by the mid-1930s, Hitler began to simply ignore the Treaty of Versailles. And he built the Navy up, he built the Army up, and no one stopped him. And as a result, the whole thing started over again in 1939 when Hitler invaded Poland, and then later in France in 1940. So historians often think that really World War II was just a continuation of World War I. And a time period between 1918 and 1939, was just a halftime. Just a break, and then the war started again.